The Patrick Riggins Show. Call in now, 865-243-TALK. That's 243-8255. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
Welcome to the Patrick Riggins Show. Move aside and let this show go through. Each week I am here with you, and we talk about how much better our country and life in general would be if the government would stop trying to run our lives and just let us live. That, of course, applies to the general population as well. You will be so much happier and more content if you will stop worrying about what everyone else is doing and just worry about yourself and your family. The radio station helping to bring you this show is the Lighthouse for Liberty, WNOX FM 100.3, radiating a strong and clear signal currently being heard in 5 states and 2 time zones. We are also broadcasting this show over the internet, and you can tune in there as well. The uniform resource locator for that is www.wnoxfm.com. If you bring up your web browser and type in that address, you will see a box with the live video and audio stream from our exclusive in-studio webcam. That address again is wnoxfm.com. Watching that live video feed, you will also see someone to my left that looks like they're trying to herd a bunch of cats while at the same time juggling wires and connectors. That would be our show producer, Tori, whose whole job is to fix the mistakes I make in the studio.
Oh, and so, there are a lot of them.
There are many.
In
fact, I don't know how you have time to do anything else.
Well, it's a long hour. I'm joking.
And this is the last hour that you'll be working today. So
it's my favorite hour.
Yes, it's we wrap this up and Tori heads home.
Yep, Seymour Way.
And hopefully no tickets or anything on the way.
No.
Anything going on band-wise or?
No, not really. Court Jar, we don't have anything booked up yet. Invaders have a couple of party-type things going. Closed to the public, I guess. Birthday parties and stuff like that, and weddings.
And those of you who don't know, Tori's a drummer for the band Court Jar and also the band Invaders, which is can you do us the accent for the Invaders?
It's a British invasion tribute band, so we all got to talk sort of like the Beatles.
And can they hear you when you're talking like that with the drums going too?
No, they can't hear me, but they can hear the singer. And the singer, he comes out and he talks, but no.
Well, and you guys can go out, if you want to hear them, you can go out and Google those 2 bands and find Tori out there playing. And it looks like Ted Nugent on the drums. Is that what?
Ted Nugent. I've heard Jesus Christ. I was just looking like, that's all.
That's
long hair,
it.
beard, that's it. Sandals.
All right, so if Tori's out there playing, and we'll announce it on this show, be sure and get out there and see him, because I keep saying I'm going to, but I never have yet.
Yeah, we were supposed to have had an autograph session at the Well a couple weeks ago, and there were a lot of disappointed fans because you weren't there. I mean, there was a line, it was stretched halfway down Kingston Pike, and they were just all cheering Patrick.
I think they were saying Posey. See, they thought David Posey was going to be there, and everybody lined up for that. And then if I'd shown up, there'd have been a little bit of a riot.
Yeah, Dave's on his way home listening to his car going, thank you.
Yeah, he's
Good plug, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. He's saying, I'm going to start showing up at Tori's things if there's people wanting autographs from him. All right, thanks again for tuning in this week to everyone out there. You are listening to the radio show devoted to ridding your life of that pesky and overbearing malfunctioning machine known as government. Not that all government is bad. Unfortunately, it is a necessary evil. But what we have today is not a small little thorn in your side, but a huge elephant sitting on your chest. And like a gigantic pachyderm would do in that position, it is slowly suffocating your liberty and freedom. Seemingly, it appears that a lot of Americans are perfectly content to allow this to happen. Luckily, people like you and other listeners to this radio show are, really getting fed up and want to make some changes.
I'm fed up.
Yes, exactly, Tori. Can't take it no more. They are tired of listening to the excuses of people in Washington who benefit from this colossus known as government. They are starting to wake up and deciding the status quo is no longer acceptable. A familiar quote attributed to Japanese Admiral Yamamoto after the attack on Pearl Harbor, although nothing has ever been found to officially link it to him. I think it is fitting to the situation we have now in this country, and that is, quote, "I fear all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve," unquote. This is what I'm trying to do with this radio show. Fill you with a resolve to stop all the government intrusion that is happening around us every day. One of the ways I mentioned last week during the show is to keep a real close eye on your representatives in Congress. After that, I received a couple of emails, and some people had talked to me saying that most people don't have time to do that. They are working, going to ball games, watching their kids play. They just don't have the extra time in the day to allow to follow up on their people in Congress or even their local representatives. This is what these people are counting on, an electorate that is not paying attention to what is happening because they know getting something passed is the easy part. Trying to get it overturned afterwards is almost next to impossible. Unless it's something really egregious, most people are not going to bother trying to correct bad legislation. My advice to this problem is to get together with a bunch of like-minded friends, and each of you take a piece of legislation that your representative is working on. Have a weekly meeting at your favorite restaurant, and each person go over their particular bill, how it is faring in Congress, and recommended action concerning it. In this way, no one person is having to waste all their time, and I would not call it a waste, but everyone in the group stays informed by someone they can trust, not the news media or a spokesperson that has their own agenda. By you staying informed, you can talk intelligently to your other friends, coworkers, people you happen to meet, and thus maybe influence them with hard facts and good information. I am sure you also find your little group growing more and more each week as people become interested in what you are doing. And the more people you have, the more you can watch and be informed about what your representatives, both nationwide and local, are doing. We're coming up on the first break in the show already, though stay tuned through this pause in the action here on the Patrick Riggins Show. When we come back, we'll have even more to talk about. More excitement, more information, more fun, and more Tory. Yay! We'll see you after this break.
Fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. The Patrick Riggins Show. Call in now at 865-243-8255. That's 243-TALK. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
Welcome back to the Patrick Riggins Show. I'm your host, Patrick Riggins. In times like these, you will be glad you have stable and strong core principles to fall back on. That is the great thing about thinking about why you have the principles you do, not just picking them up here and there from television, your friends, or even this radio show. I don't want you to sit out there and soak up what I'm saying without thinking. You should never blindly follow. You should always be comparing what you hear with your internal libertarian filter and plain old common sense. Along these lines, I know you probably have not heard anything about this, but for those of you who've been on vacation or something, there is a shooting in Aurora, Colorado this week. Of course, everyone even remotely political is trying to use the tragedy to further their respective agendas. As Americans, though, we should be used to this by now. Any tragedy is immediately grabbed by both sides, liberals and conservatives, to try and make some hay off the backs of the victims for their particular side of a debate. What I want to warn you about is the jumping to conclusions that often happens with a big news item. The key is to always run things you're being told, as I said, through your libertarian filter that we're developing here on this radio show. The purpose of this is to make sure what is being said is not, in fact, an argument in disguise for taking away more of your rights and freedoms. This is done by our government every time it can. We have this so-called war on terror, which is never going to be over, and thus we'll never get back our rights that the government has seized, all in the name of trying to protect us. If you are a regular listener to this show, you understand all of this is just a ruse to take away more of your freedom. Here is a prescient quote from me on this show just last week. The government cannot take all the risk out of life, and it cannot protect you from people intent on doing you harm. The best it can do is allow you to have the freedom to protect yourself. I have said it over and over during the short time this show has been running. Government cannot protect you. You have to do that yourself. The only thing government can do is write up the report about what happened after the incident has already occurred. If you listen to some in the media, they would make you think this only happens in America, that somehow our country drives people to this sort of behavior. It must be that evil capitalism rewarding people for succeeding and making people who don't feel inferior. Of course, capitalism cannot do anything to anyone. It is merely a system. It is people freely selling to one another, helping each other through business relationships. That makes the country and our economy grow. Capitalism enables you to be rewarded for your hard work. And if you feel inferior to someone else because they are doing better than you, that isn't the fault of capitalism. It's the fault of that person. And it's the fault of that you and that person. Or, excuse me, it's not the fault of that person. It's your fault. There we go. I'll get that out. No matter how you feel, it is completely up to you. An external situation cannot make you feel good. It cannot make you feel bad or happy or sad. It is your response to the situation that determines how you feel. The situation is just that. It's a situation. It doesn't have an agenda. It isn't trying to hurt your feelings. Your response to it may be to have these bad feelings, but that is totally within your control. Unless you have some sort of mental problem wherein it is still within your control, you just might not be able to exert that control. But getting back to my point, these things have happened around the world. For instance, and you may not recall them immediately, but on July 22nd, 2011, Anders Breivik killed 77 people in Norway in 2 attacks. In downtown Oslo, he set off a bomb and then went on a shooting spree at a youth camp outside the city. On April 30th, 2009, Farda Gadirov killed 12 people at the Azerbaijan State Oil Academy. On September 23rd, 2008, Matti Saari killed 10 people at a vocational college in Finland. He burned their bodies with firebombs and then shot himself before authorities could arrest him. My point is there have been and always will be crazy people out there who carry out unspeakable acts against other human beings. To tell the truth, a lot of these things go unreported. But does that make them any less of a problem? Is killing people in one part of the world okay, while killing people in another part not? In the face of these attacks against our fellow humans here on planet Earth, our wise and close friends at the United Nations want to restrict and ultimately do away with your rights to protect yourself against another's aggression. The international organization is currently drafting a treaty with the goal to limit the ability of terrorists to acquire arms. However, the UN has never said who or who isn't a terrorist. And the wording is sufficiently vague that it can be applied to the general population of a country. Because so few countries in this world actually allow their citizens to possess firearms, the UN has decided to not exempt civilian arms from the treaty. However, through some last-minute bargaining with the U.S., there have been some momentum to exempt ammunition from the treaty. Of course, that doesn't help you much if you don't have a gun to shoot it, although they claim in the final draft small arms will be excluded. What I find interesting in all this is the desire for a static world. And we've never had that. But big government types, and there are plenty at the UN, want the world to exist how it looks now forever. And that has never happened. Countries are always breaking apart and coming together in different ways. People separate from another population. Others come together after years apart. The way they do this is usually through war, and fighting a war requires weapons, and weapons require someone to make and sell them. This is Earth. There will always be war going on somewhere. Trying to outlaw weapons or even trying to keep them out of the hands of people that want them will never work, because human will is not easily crushed. And if it is, it usually doesn't stay crushed for long. If terrorists want weapons, they'll get them. That's how it is in the world. As I said at the start of this show, governments cannot protect you. It is up to you to do that. And if someone wants to light off a nuclear device in your city, there is not a whole lot you can do about it. Don't sit there and believe the hype that our government can somehow track all the nuclear stuff floating around the world. It can't. Just think about the former Soviet Union and all the nuclear parts and pieces it had in that country. All of the scientists working on nuclear devices who are now unemployed and maybe have taken jobs with another country looking to develop a bomb. With all these things floating around, why hasn't something happened already? Is it because of the excellent security on our southern border? The best way to protect ourselves is by looking to our Constitution and abiding by what it states. All men are created equal, and they are endowed with certain inalienable rights. If we would treat other countries like that, we wouldn't have a tenth of the problems we have now. Keeping our noses out of other countries' business is an excellent way to start. But here again, we're talking about a government that cannot keep its nose out of every aspect of the lives of its citizens. How are we supposed to think it will treat anyone else any differently? Most people in other nations don't hate the United States. They, in fact, blame their government for their problems. In fact, the Pew Research Center recently completed a survey, and it showed that 92% of Indians, that is, citizens of the country of India, blame the government for their economic situation, while only 17% blame banks and financial institutions. 91% of Mexicans and Japanese also label their governments as a primary and secondary offender responsible for economic hardship. Even young people in Britain, France, Germany, Spain, Tunisia, Mexico, Brazil, and Japan blame their respective governments for being obstacles to the economy. But the point we're at now, though, fortunately, we're still rewarded for hard work here. And I don't know how much longer it will last on this present course, but for now, hard work does have its rewards. So, you see, it isn't our economic system. It isn't the fact that we exist. It is the fact that we are trying to mind everyone's business. And by having a presence in a country that is having problems, we offer their government bureaucrats a way to put the blame on us instead of themselves. No government is ever going to admit it is screwing its people. And by having us poking around in their country, they have someone to point at and put the blame on. So their citizens aren't looking to them, they're putting the blame on us. And the quickest way out of that situation is for us just to get out of their country and let them run their own thing there. All right, we're up on the bottom of the hour already. Just flying through this show. This is Patrick Riggins with the Patrick Riggins Show. We'll go through the bottom of the hour break, and when we come back, we'll have a lot of stuff here. We'll just try to cram in everything we can. Be with us here in the next few minutes.
Fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. The Patrick Riggins Show. Call in now at 865-243-8255. That's 243-TALK. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
And welcome back to the second half of the Patrick Riggins Show. This half hour, we're going to do a little house cleaning. Or I guess I should say studio cleaning.
You can come on by my house then. Just right after work, come on over, do some house cleaning.
You practically live here, so it's kind of like I am at your house.
Yes.
I just, just want to have the authorities knocking on the door telling us to turn everything down.
It's only on Saturday nights.
Oh. All right, I'm going to shoot through some stories here we have not been able to get to because of the time constraints on this show. I don't really have any particular order on these, so we'll just dive right in and get as much as we can get done before the next break. One thing that kind of grabbed my eye this week was Boston Mayor Thomas, I guess it's Menino, is vowing to block Chick-fil-A from opening any stores in his city, citing the fact that he doesn't agree with the company's president, Dan Cathy's view against gay marriage. Mr. Cathy has stated the company supports the biblical definition of marriage as between a man and a woman. The mayor said he doesn't want a company that discriminates against gay and lesbians being able to open any stores in the city, and he will not allow Chick-fil-A into Boston unless they change their policy. According to the statement released by the company, quote, "The Chick-fil-A culture and service tradition in our restaurants is to treat every person with honor, dignity, and respect, regardless of their belief, race, creed, sexual orientation, or gender," unquote. So, what the Boston mayor is saying is typical of liberals. He doesn't want the consumer to make the decision about whether Chick-fil-A can sell enough of their products to make opening a store in that city profitable. Like all liberals, he insists on making whatever decision he feels is right, regardless of whether the people agree with it or not. Obviously, he doesn't believe the citizens of Boston can make the correct decision for themselves. And by correct decision, I mean they are agreeing with him. And since the citizens cannot be trusted to make that decision, he must make it for them. Wouldn't it carry more weight with the company if they opened a store in Boston and it failed miserably after spending all that money and time just to have the store go out of business because of the company's beliefs? The truth of the matter is Chick-fil-A stores are very successful, and Mr. Menino knows a store would flourish in Boston. And, well, he just cannot have that. It would vindicate the company's position. And like all liberals, he is afraid of allowing people to make up their own minds. Now, whether you agree with the company or not, it is a private company and should be allowed to make whatever decisions and policies it deems appropriate, as long as it is not infringing on the rights of others. And before you start calling in, working is not a right. You do not have a right to work at a job or a company. And believe me, a lot of Americans take that to heart. But I digress. Anyway, if you don't like how that company operates, then quit and find another place to work. Or better yet, start your own company and do things your way. That is what freedom and liberty in this country is supposed to mean. Not some elected official climbing on his high horse and telling the rest of us how to live. Speaking of which, we'll go right into this next story. I thought this was interesting. It's another education story, and this one is with a little bit of a twist. Instead of the education establishment begging for more money, this story actually details the salaries of the two heads of the top teachers' unions. Randy Weingarten, I guess, yeah, that would be, who runs the American Federation of Teachers. Her pay jumped to $407,000 between 2010 and 2011. If you factor in paid expenses and stipends, then she ends up with almost $500,000, $493,000, basically $494,000. Not to be outdone by too much, Dennis Van Rokel from the National Education Association, he received a raise to $362,000. Again, adding in paid expenses and stipends, that brings him to $460,000. Now, their salaries put them in the top 1% of earners in the country. Not too bad if it weren't for the problem of the average teacher salary is $44,000 a year. Nearly 600 staffers there at these two unions have six-figure salaries. That's at both unions. To try and blunt the criticism, Weingarten said, quote, "Last year, I and the other two American Federation of Teachers officers, as well as all management, took a voluntary pay freeze. We did so because no one knows better than we do the economic distress our members are experiencing." Yeah, you know, you could pay me almost $500,000 and freeze my pay right there, too. Notice there was no talk about a pay cut, just a pay freeze. Would you take a pay freeze at $500,000 there, Tori?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Just freeze me right on to $500,000.
Yeah, I think that's so hilarious when people are saying that. Yeah, freeze my pay at $500,000. That's really going to crimp my style there.
No, I'm sure there was much griping.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you can't do that.
I've got to live on this.
Yeah.
That's what, a little under $10,000 a week.
How can I live on $10,000 a week?
I don't know.
I've got things.
I've got stuff.
I need more stuff.
And yes, more stuff. One of the things I find so funny is when these people advocate for higher and higher taxes to fund education, then turn right around and rip it off, and then get upset when we call them on it. But let someone express some reservations about how much we spend on education here in America and how little we get in return compared to other countries. They act like the self-righteous, arrogant people they really are. How dare you ask the Almighty why you must pay so much in taxes? This is for the children, and no cost is too great when it comes to them. So, excuse me, don't you think you're getting paid a little too much? Of course, they'll tell you, that's none of your concern. Get back to working and pay your taxes. It is time for us to make it our concern. This is for you teachers out there that are in these unions. Make these people justify their requests for more money with hard evidence. These guys are taking tons of money, and as I stated, the average teacher salary is $44,000 a year. I find it hard to believe that that's over 10 times what an average teacher makes, that they're really earning their money up there in this union. What they're basically doing is hamstringing our educational system. Let's see, real quick, I got one more story here before we come up on the break. This one was really, really funny. Let's see, for everyone traveling around this summer, this was a story about bed bugs who seem to be coming back. The story was the union representing Detroit's bus drivers has asked the city council to put pressure on the transit agency to help stop the spread of bed bugs on buses. About 50 Detroit Department of Transportation drivers have reported seeing the bugs on buses, and some have even been bitten within the last year. Now, bed bugs are becoming a big problem, and you would think the pest control industry would be riding to our rescue. But here's the reason why not. According to industry estimates, it takes about $200 million to have a new product certified and accepted for use in a residential environment. So thank you, United States government bureaucrats. Thank you for not letting me read a label and decide if I want to use something in my home or not. Thank you for making all these hard decisions for me and for protecting me from these evil and heartless chemical industry employees. Thanks to you, I can now live closer to nature. In fact, I can have nature crawling on me and sucking my blood while I sleep. It makes life so much more pleasant to do away with all these nasty chemicals and additives that make our lives safer and easier. I would much rather go back to living with fleas, bed bugs, and whatever else wants to feed on me. It makes me feel so pious and good to always be aware that as humans, we are the ones that should always suffer, not animals or insects. We should not have it any better than Rover laying out in the front yard and having to itch a flea bite.
I'm picking up your sarcasm.
Well, I should hope so, because I'm laying it on pretty thick.
So, did you catch that sarcasm, Toad?
Caught it. Just dripping with it.
And I was laying it on pretty thick.
Yeah.
All right, we're up on the last segment of the show, or last break for the last segment of the show. running through this show just like wildfire. We'll come back with more. This is Patrick Riggins with The Patrick Riggins Show.
Fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. The Patrick Riggins Show. Call in now at 865-243-8255. That's 243-TALK. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
And welcome back to the Patrick Riggins Show. This is Patrick Riggins. And I have one of the seven dwarfs with me today, Sneezy.
Oh, that couldn't be any worse planned except if it's on the air. Sneeze juice.
Sneeze, good. That's the thing. If you're not tuning in at WNOXFM.com, you miss a whole lot that's going on in here.
The behind the scenes.
But the behind the scenes, that's exactly right. And it's amazing, you know, when you listen to shows and everything sounds professional, sounds put together and everything.
Sounds.
Yeah, exactly. You watch on the webcam and you're like, these guys are just juggling stuff right and left, and
they're nowhere near professional.
Yeah, they're running in here at the last minute.
Sneezing.
Yeah. Oh, but it sounds good, and that's what's important. Yes. That's why Tori is such a top-notch producer, because he makes it sound great.
It's my job to make you sound pretty.
Yeah, and you make me sound pretty. Now, if you can just, do something. What we need to do is put, like, a mannequin of Brad Pitt or something up in here in front of the webcam, and that way they'll think that's me.
Yes. I can make you sound better, but I can't do nothing about your looks. I can't work miracles.
And they'd sit there and say, wow, that Patrick looks just like Brad Pitt.
You got to go for the Patrick Swayze, the Roadhouse look.
Oh, okay, the rough and tumble,
the Roadhouse quaff.
Yeah, well, I'd have to hit the gym too, get the cut, get the muscles. So.
It's Swayze.
Okay, a little bit more stuff here to get done real quick. This story crossed my desk. It was a little while ago, and I've been trying to work it in, but never had the time. But I thought it was pretty interesting. It involves the Department of Homeland Security telling their armed agents that in an active shooter scenario, which means exactly how it sounds, there is a person actively shooting at a crime scene. The agents, what they're advising them if someone comes into the offices. This is kind of relevant given the thing in Colorado here, but luckily there were none of these agents in that theater. But the problem is the agents, along with all the other employees, are supposed to run away and hide. And only when they are cornered by the active shooter are they to, as a last resort, become aggressive and throw things at him or her. They are then supposed to call law enforcement and wait for their arrival, presumably while other innocent people are being slaughtered. At first, the armed agents thought they were mistakenly required to take the course being administered by DHS, but officials there at DHS maintain it has been designed for all employees, both civilian and law enforcement, and no one should rush into a situation where they or others around them could get hurt. I guess that the active shooter currently killing people is not considered to be hurting anyone by the officials. In the story, one of the people is quoted, "The Department of Homeland Security takes very seriously its responsibility to protect all of its employees from threats that may surface in the workplace." U.S. Customs and Border Protection spokesman Michael Friel said in a written statement, CBP, which is Customs and Border Protection, workforce training is designed to prepare all employees, including leaders, managers, supervisors, law enforcement personnel, and non-law enforcement personnel to understand their own roles and the roles of their fellow employees in responding to threats. In an active shooter scenario, employees are taught to take actions that keep them alive. But members of the union say this is the union with the law enforcement out there at the Customs and Border Protection, say they are obligated to protect the public in such a situation, whether they are on duty or not, which is exactly right. Given the instructions, some wonder if they would be disciplined for taking down a gunman in a situation like the Fort Hood shooting or what we had just here over in Colorado. Another quote from them, from the union, is, "It's always comforting to know that those of us who carry a weapon when we are off duty, if we should encounter such a situation, can stop a shooter and save countless lives. But in spite of this, now they can look forward to being disciplined or fired by the Border Patrol because we should have to run away and hide and then maybe throw objects at the deranged killer instead of taking action and stopping him with a firearm." So I guess the government does not even trust its own federal law enforcement officers to handle the situation. They are just supposed to hide or throw off the supplies at the attacker until local law enforcement can arrive.
For God's sake, be careful out there. Careful, I'd be in the Coast Guard.
Of course, they're not in the Coast Guard. But we did manage to slip our microphone into one of their training days, and this is what we got here.
The Black Knight always triumphs! Run away! Run away! Run away! Run away! All right, we're calling a draw.
But seriously, this is the government we're supposed to be trusting with our security, with our health care. A government that is sitting here telling its own armed law enforcement agents not to defend others or themselves in a situation like an active shooter scenario. As I said, this story has been sitting on my desk for the past few weeks, and we have just never had time to get to it. But I thought it especially timely, and I really wanted to get to it with this situation in Colorado, that these guys, these off-duty law enforcement officers, are oftentimes the difference between life and death in one of these things. And real quickly, I don't have my notes directly in front of me on it, but there was a shooting in Aurora, Colorado, back in the spring where two guys were arguing, and I believe one of them was chasing the other one, and they ended up at a church. They were chasing them in cars. They pulled in a church parking lot. One guy gets out, runs in. The other guy jumps out of the car. A lady comes out of the church to see what's going on. Second guy shoots the lady coming out of the church, kills her immediately. Her nephew comes out of the church, who happens to be an off-duty law enforcement officer, pulls his weapon and kills the shooter immediately in the parking lot. Now, one life was lost, but who knows how many more would have been lost had that law enforcement officer not been there. This is part of the problem when you have a nation that restricts a Second Amendment right to carrying a weapon and protecting yourself. These are the problems we have. Now, I'm not saying that would have happened in Colorado. I'm not saying that there was someone sitting in that theater that was denied a permit for some reason or other and just didn't have it, but having more people armed is not a bad thing. It's usually a good thing overall. Anyway, we've come up on the last of the show. Again, I would like to thank everyone for listening and making this show just tons and tons successful. I love you guys out there. I love you listening every week. You can go to our Facebook at facebook.com/Patrick Riggins Show. Be sure and hit the like there on Facebook. Also, if you want to follow us on Twitter, it's at Patrick Riggins. And you can go to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Patrick Riggins Show. That's spelled Riggins Show. Join me next Sunday afternoon where once again we'll talk about freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. This is Patrick Riggins, and we will see you next Sunday. Have a great week.
Join us again next week for a solid dose of truth on the Patrick Riggins Show every Sunday from 4 to 5 p.m. Be there.